In this next tutorial, we're going to look at the basics of creating a graphic and caption using the graphics tools within Adobe Premiere. The first thing to mention is, as soon as you want to add any captions, graphics, titles, rather than staying in the normal editing workspace, there is a dedicated workspace all geared up to make the creation of graphics and captions a bit simpler in Premiere. So what you do is you go to your workspaces at the top of the screen and select the graphics workspace there. If for any reason you can't see that, you should also be able to find that under the window menu, workspaces, and select it from the list there. I'm just going to reset that so it's default settings as well, which you can do via the workspaces menu again, reset to saved layout, or you can also, if I just make a change to it again, do via the little action menu next to the graphics workspace there and choose reset to saved layout there, and that resets the layout back to its default. However, I would usually make a couple of changes to this anyway. You have an area called Essential Graphics over here. This is the main difference between this and the Edit workspace, and I guess also your toolbars in a slightly different position. But I'm just going to make that little panel a bit wider. The two key windows here that you end up using are the Program window to do your layout in, and the Essential Graphics window to do your amendments to the caption that you create. Another tab that can come into play though is Effects Controls, and this is one that you would usually use when you want to animate your graphic, which we will also look at but in a separate tutorial. So in terms of creating a graphic, first of all, there are two tabs within the Essential Graphics panel. Browse gives you access to a number of pre-built captions, lower thirds, titles that you can pick from. To use these, all you do is drag them from the Browse tab onto your timeline and place them where you want them to go. You can then move your playhead over the graphic and give you a preview of the graphic itself. Some of these have built-in animations already applied to them, some don't. But to edit the graphic, you then select the graphic element on the timeline, and in the edit panel in Essential Graphics, and also if you've got Effects Controls open, you will see some controls. We are going to create a graphic from scratch, so I'm going to go through some of these controls in more detail. But for example, I can select the text here. It will give me font options, size options, layout, formatting options for color and things like that, and a little menu at the top, which is also another way of selecting the text. And by using the type tool on the toolbar, I can just select the text itself and type in my own text. That's using one of the pre-existing templates. I'm going to go through this in more detail, but we'll do this based on actually creating our own template from scratch. So I'm just going to delete that graphic. Now, to create a graphic from scratch, what you do is place your playhead where you want your graphic. I'm going to create a lower third name strap here. You've got 5 separate tools that let you create graphical elements and generate initially a graphic itself, and they are the type tool I've already just touched upon, and there's actually 2 type tools here. If you hold your mouse down on it, there's a vertical type tool and a horizontal type tool. You also have the pen tool for drawing freehand shapes, and a rectangle and ellipse tool. If you use any of these tools on the screen here, they will automatically generate a 5-second graphic at the playhead position above anything on the timeline that is currently there. Just to show you this, look, here's the ellipse tool. If I draw an ellipse, there it is, and can you see it's created a graphic here? Because actually there probably wasn't quite enough space there, it's overlapped the cutaway here on video 2, so it's put the graphic on video 3. But it generated that automatically. Let me just bring the playhead back slightly. Look, here's a rectangle tool, same thing. If I keep the graphic selected and use multiple tools, it just adds additional elements to the graphic itself. And in fact, if I just make my track height a bit bigger on the timeline so I see some thumbnails, can you see in the thumbnail for the graphic there? Just makes some room for the video. You see updating the thumbnail there. So that's the rectangle and ellipse tool. Here is the pen tool for drawing freehand shapes. You literally click and join up to where you started. And here are the type tools. Just click and then start typing. If I deselect the graphic by clicking elsewhere on the timeline and then use one of the tools again, instead of adding to the existing graphic, it will create a new graphic on a new track. So if you want to combine a number of elements within the same graphic, make sure you keep the graphic on the timeline selected. So let me just delete that one and we'll set everything up on the timeline again. So I'll put my playhead here. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a lower third where we have a background rectangle, comes out to about here, maybe slightly transparent, and 2 lines of text, title, subtitle. So I'm going to get the rectangle tool first of all and draw out some form of sort of bar like so. Now as soon as I draw this, as you can see, look, there's the graphic again, and straight away we're in the edit mode here, and there's a shape now added to the graphic, and that appears in this little menu at the top. I can rename that if I want to. You just do a right click on it, choose rename, and let's call it bar. Okay, that, and you see that just updates there. And every time I add a new element to the graphic, it will appear in this little list. These also act a bit like layers in, say, Photoshop. So whatever is on the top of the list is in front of everything else. But we'll look at that in a minute. I'm going to do a little bit of formatting to this bar before we add any text. So I'm going to go back up to the arrow tool first of all. The arrow tool in this context lets you move objects around within the graphic. It also, as you can see, has some controls here. You can extend or trim or scale and so on. If you move just outside a corner, you can also rotate the object. You can see I can just rotate, and it rotates around this little symbol here, which is the anchor point. If I want it to rotate around a different point, I need to move the anchor point by dragging that little target symbol, and then it will rotate around wherever that anchor point is. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend out the bar slightly so it just sits off of this edge of the screen. And then we've got all the format options down here for the bar itself, so I can change the fill color, add a stroke and outline around it, add a drop shadow. So look, here's stroke. I can change the size of the stroke there. Let's change the fill color by clicking on the color swatch for fill. As soon as you click on the rectangle, it opens up the Adobe color picker. If you've not used this before, to pick your hue, you just drag the slider up and down here. And then based on the colour that you pick, or the hue that you pick, you can pick the variation of it within by clicking in the big square here. You've got black along the top, grey scale down the left hand side, white in the bottom left hand corner. As you move to the right, the colour becomes more saturated. And then to OK that, you just click in there, click OK. That sets your colour for you. Or if I click back on there, there's also some options now to add gradients. So you can do linear or radial gradient. If you click the gradient options, you get a gradient bar. On the gradient bar, you have what's called stops. So these bottom ones are color stops. So if I click on the left-hand color stop there, so select it, pick a color, it adds that color to the gradient. Click on the right-hand one, select that, pick a different color, it will add that color. You can also add more color stops by clicking underneath the gradient bar, and that gives you a further color stop. You can also add as many additional colors as you want to your gradient. The color stops themselves can be dragged left or right to change the spread of the gradient, and in between each color stop you have a little diamond handle that changes the actual amount of spread towards one stop or the other. To remove a color stop, you simply drag them away from the gradient bar. At the top of the gradient bar you have opacity stops. These allow you to add areas of opacity within the gradient. You select them, there's an opacity option just underneath the bar itself. You set the opacity that you want. As you can see, that adds an area of transparency to the gradient. Again, you can add more of these by just clicking above the gradient bar, move them around, change the position of the transparency within the gradient, and to remove them, again, you just drag them away from the gradient bar. We have both linear and radial gradients. Let's add quickly a linear gradient first. So I'm just going to change the colours slightly. We'll set a blue and maybe black, and then I'm going to click OK. As you can see now here, it's added the gradient to the rectangle. These two little blue handles allow you to change the origin, the start and the end point of the gradient within the shape itself, within the rectangle itself. You can move those close together, further apart. If we just go back for 1 second, I'm going to click on the fill option again. We'll just quickly look at radial gradient. Okay, that. As you can see, look, this adds a circular gradient, and again you have the 2 points that can change the spread within the bar. A further thing that I can do here now, once we've set this gradient, is change the overall opacity slightly of the rectangle itself. There's a little slider here that affects opacity, so I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. And let's next add some text. So I'm going to go to the Type tool, select that, click somewhere in the area that I want, and add a name and a title. So now I can either hit return to add a second line of text, or if I want two separate text elements, if I click just outside the original one there, that will give me the option to add some more text. In terms of moving the text around, again you go back to the arrow tool, you can drag it around, you can also use the control points to scale up or to scale down. But when you have text selected, you have various formatting options for the text available in the edit window here. So I can, for example, change the font, and all the installed fonts that I have on my system are available through Premiere. So let's maybe change the font to Helvetica. Can change the style here as well, bold for that one. Alignment options, so left alignment, center alignment, right alignment. Tracking options for changing the space between letters, kerning for changing the space between individual letters, line spacing here whether you've got more than one line. So all the standard text formatting tools that you would expect from Adobe or other packages are all available. We have some additional options here. So faux bold lets you add bold to a font that doesn't naturally have one. Faux italic lets you change the font into italic, where again you don't necessarily have one in the style options. We've got the size of the text here, which I'm going to just increase slightly on that one. Caps, small caps, large caps, superscript and subscript. So let's change maybe the name to all caps. We'll keep the title in lowercase, so I'm just going to select that there. You can select, by the way, the text with the arrow tool or the type tool. If I wanted to just format individual letters here, I would select them like so. Any formatting I then do just affects those letters. If I want to format though a whole set of text, it's easier to select with the arrow tool. Any formatting you then do affects the whole of the text. So let's just quickly change the font again, and again pick Helvetica New. I can change the style there, and I'm going to bring the size down a bit on that one. Change the color of the text is here. As you can see, you get the color picker up again. We can add an outline, stroke, or a drop shadow. With the drop shadow selected, we have some controls here to do with the weight of the drop shadow, so the opacity of the drop shadow, direction, distance from the text, softness, and so on. I can take that all off just by unticking drop shadow. I think with this one we don't really need any additional drop shadow on the text. Let's just select my name. I'm going to take the shadow off that as well. Alignment options, so you can take an object, some alignment options here. So this vertical center button aligns it to the center of the frame vertically. This one does the same horizontally. By shift clicking more than one object, I can select them together. Oh, by the way, I can also do this in the menu here to select multiple items, and with multiple items selected I can align their edges, their centers, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align the left hand edge of my two bits of type and just move those into place. Just one other thing that I mentioned earlier, that this menu works a little bit like layers. So if I take the bar object here, drag it up in that list, as you can see, it then goes in front of the text, or drag it down underneath the text again. On a very simple level, to animate the lower third on and off, you can just add transitions to the graphic item on the timeline. I'm going to show you in a second tutorial how to actually animate properly elements within the title itself, so the text, the bar, and so on separately. But on a simple level, it's a quick and easy way to animate a title or a caption just by using transitions. So I'm going to go to the Effects tab, and we're going to go into Video Transitions, and I'm going to stick a wipe on the start of the graphic. That will wipe the graphic on. If you want to do a fade up or a fade down with the graphic, an easy way of doing that is just put a cross dissolve on the graphic. So look, I'll put a cross dissolve on the other end so you can see that. So that now wipes on and fades out. If I want to make the title shorter, I just trim it back with the arrow tool, you can see. And if I want to make obviously those transitions quicker, I'm just going to zoom in slightly, double click on the first one there, and let's change it from 1 second to say around ½ second. And I'm going to do the same with the fade out. Just add 12 frames to those, double click on them, add 12 frames, and you can see that speeds up both transitions. So the final two things to mention here are, what if I want to use a variation of this title, either within this project or in another project. So within this project is simple. All I need to do is copy the existing title to the next area that needs one. So there's an area here over our next person. So I'm going to select my existing title, hold my Option key down or Alt key on a PC, and drag the graphic along, keeping that key held down. That creates a copy of whatever you drag, and that works with clips, it also with audio, video, graphics, and so on. If I then put my playhead over the copy and select it, I can now go in and edit the text, and so on. And I would just repeat that process for each of the people in my edit that needed a lower third. So that's fine, but what if I want to make the lower third available to future projects? Well, you can also save your caption, your title, your graphic as a template, so it appears in the browse area here. I would usually do this by putting some generic text in first. So actually what I'll do is I'll just make another quick copy of my title. I'm literally just going to use this, change the text to something generic. So keeping the graphic selected, I'm going to do a right click on the graphic and pick Export as Motion Graphics Template. Okay, it's going to give me then a few options. First of all, what do I want to call my lower third? So let's call this Training Lower Third. Where do I want to save it? I can save it to anywhere on my local drive, desktop, documents folder, wherever. If I click browse, I can switch the destination that it's saving to. This is quite useful if I did want to share it with somebody, so I can save it onto a drive for them or save it onto my desktop and email it to them, for example. By clicking on this menu here, I can save this to my library. So I'm going to go to my library here, and then I'm going to click OK. It's now going to upload that template to my cloud library, and it should also appear in my templates. If I scroll down to the bottom here, it's alphabetically ordered. There it is. Now to use this again in a future project, that will always be there. All I have to do is drag it onto the timeline, click on it, change the text. Just one last thing to mention here, even though my original ones do have the transitions on, there is no animation on this one. The transitions don't get saved as part of the template. However, in my next tutorial to do with graphics, I'm going to show you how you can actually add and fix animation to a graphic. So we're going to further amend this one and look at how to animate it.